following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
This is Ralph Tycho with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Package Tourist with Matthew DiBiase. And here's the man himself, Matthew DiBiase. How are you, Matt?
Pretty good, Ralph. Pretty good. And welcome to everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and all the ships at sea. It's a great pleasure to kick off my brand new show, and I'd like to talk about the birth of my third child, a book that I released 2 weeks ago titled Lords of the Gridiron, College Football's Greatest Coaches. The reason why I wrote that book is for the longest time, although there are plenty of biographies on great college football coaches, no one, as far as I know, has ever attempted to actually compare, rate, and rank the greatest coaches of all time using a metrical system. It's never been done before. I mean, imagine how would Nick Saban compare with like Barrett Bryant? How would Woody Hayes compare with Bo Schembechler? How would Darrell Royal compare with like Barry Switzer? And what I did was, starting several years ago and then starting in earnest 2 years ago, I'd start developing a system where, based on a team's winning percentage, I would award certain amount of points. Like if a team had a winning percentage between 501 and 549, they only got 1 point. Or if they had a perfect season, they got 14 points. If they won a minor bowl game, they won 9 points, whereas they won a major bowl game, they would get 11 points. And what I did was I took every single Division 1A NCAA coach from the very beginning, from like the 19th century all the way up to the 2018 season, with a minimum of 10 seasons of coaching experience at the Division 1A level, and I ran their names through my system. And I had a pool of 416 coaches, and after several years, rating and ranking these coaches, I determined who the top 50 were, and then I wrote bios on each of those 50, and I was able to interview those great coaches who are still alive, men like Tom Osborne, Lou Holtz, Mac Brown, Steve Spurrier, and other coaches who are still alive, and ask them questions about their coaching careers, their offensive and defensive tactics and philosophies, recalling the great moments like Urban Meyer telling me about his first national championship at Florida in 2006, Lou Holtz talking about the 1988 season where he was the last Notre Dame coach ever to win a national championship. I also talked to some great players like Heisman Trophy winner Johnny Rodgers of Nebraska, who led Nebraska to 2 national championships in 70 and 71. He regaled me with memories about the late Bob Devaney. Steve Spurrier, who won the Heisman Trophy in 66 and also coached Heisman Trophy winner Danny Wuerffel at Florida in the mid-90s. I talked to Tom Osborne. We talked about that, his decision to go for the 2-point conversion in the '84 Orange Bowl, where they fell short, and we talked about it. They gave me insights about how they led their men, how they motivated them, how they managed to maintain their winning styles, their little secrets, and we covered the waterfront. And my book covers coaches from all the eras. I mean, I've got coaches from the late 19th century all the way up to Dabo Swinney, who won the national championship last year. And what my book is, it's available on Amazon. It's not available in stores. You have to buy it online at Amazon. It's a substantial read. It's 350 pages, but what it does is it gets into the nuts and bolts of what it was that made these great coaches great, and what made their teams, the many national champions that they were. And it was just released 2 weeks ago, and what I find amazing was that some of the coaches were very modest. Like Tom Osborne was very quiet and unassuming. I mean, when I told him you're one of the greatest of all time, he said, well, he kind of demurred on that. He didn't feel that way, but believe me, when you read the book, I mean, that amazed me with how high he ranked. I mean, I knew he was going to make the top 50, but I didn't realize he was going to rate that high. and it just totally blew me away. And it was just, and even though I didn't meet him in the flesh, what amazed me about Tom Osborne was that you felt his sense of authority, and he was the type of leader that you wanted to help him out. In other words, he didn't intimidate you. He didn't frighten you. He was that type of guy. You want him as your next-door neighbor. You want him serving on the board of your corporation. You want him in your church. You want him in your foxhole if you're in a war. In other words, absolutely solid and dependable, and you want to help this guy out because you want to, not because he's making you to or he's scaring you to. And
he was real too. He could talk to the people.
Yes. I mean, he was what he was. His whole life was from Nebraska. He was born and raised there. He went to college there. He served as assistant coach under Bob Devaney there. He took over when Bob Devaney retired. He took over and stayed there for 25 incredible seasons, and he was absolutely awesome. And I talked to other coaches like Lou Holtz, a man, one of the greatest raconteurs in college football today. Even though he hasn't coached in decades, in fact, when I interviewed him, he was on the road. He's on the road constantly giving motivational speeches. I mean, just incredible humor, like Casey Stengel. Just always got a quick one, and it always guaranteed to make you laugh and all of that. And he could really get into the nuts and bolts. I mean, he was getting into situations like, what my defense would be if it's like third and long, or if it's third and short. He could get into that. He talked about, how do you maintain that winning edge? When he talked about the '88 season, he talked about he expected his team to make an even greater effort than before. He demanded perfection for that one season, and he got it. He got it amazingly. And since then, Notre Dame has yet to equal it. It was just incredible moments. It was like when I interviewed old J.D. Roberts, who was an old Oklahoma Sooner who played for Bud Wilkinson in the early 50s. His wife had just died like weeks before, yet he insisted on going through with the interview. It was kind of like you said, a cathartic experience. In fact, recalling the old days kind of helped him heal after the death of his wife. And we got into it about it, not arguing, but just he told me about what a father figure Bud Wilkinson was to the team. In fact, that was their pet name for him. He was the Great White Father because he was like prematurely gray. He was blonde-haired and handsome, but he turned prematurely gray. But he always had those movie star good looks, and he was just. And Oklahoma in the late 40s and the 50s up to 57 was such a devastating football team. And for a time, Wilkinson, according to my calculations, was the greatest college coach from 57 to 1978, when finally Bear Bryant surpassed him in 1979 as defined by my rating system. And it was just incredible experiences. I mean, I talked to Leroy Jordan, the famous Dallas Cowboy who played for Bear Bryant, and we talked about that 61 national championship season where Alabama put on the greatest defensive performance of all time after 1939, when the Tennessee Volunteers were the last team to hold all opponents scoreless during the regular season. I mean, at Notre Dame, I think they gave up in 61 only 2.2 points per game, which is absolutely astounding. No other team has matched that since then. And Jordan was a linebacker and the center for that team. They used to play both ways in those days. And he talked about how, training camp under Bear Bryant was an ordeal because it was so ungodly hot in Tuscaloosa in August and, July and August and all that. And he talked about Bear Bryant protected his players. In other words, he wouldn't let the press get on him. He absorbed all the responsibility. In other words, if the team lost, he said, I lost the game, not the players. But if the team won, he said the players won that game. I mean, the love and reverence Jordan had for Bear Bryant just absolutely seeped through, and it's in the pages of my book. And when you read it, you'll see that. You feel the greatness. You feel in awe of the man. As if he's right there in the room with you when you read it.
Well, certainly they'll feel your passion. How did you develop that for college football?
Well, it's weird. You couldn't really apply certain standards for like pro sports to here. like in my pro stuff, you award points for a first place finish, but I couldn't do that for conference finishes because there were some teams like Notre Dame, famously, they're not in a conference. So like Florida State, before they joined the ACC, was not in a conference. Penn State, for most of its time, was an independent program like Florida State. And there's still independent programs today. And the thing is, if you're awarding points for conference finishes, then that means you're unjustly penalizing those independents. So I couldn't do that. I had to get rid of that. For a time, I thought maybe award points for like how high you rated in the polls, but I couldn't do that because, in a sense, the polls could be incredibly subjective sometimes, and there's been some controversial polling. So I thought, no, the only thing I got from the pollings was when the old days where you won it from 36 to 91 on the AP or college coaches polls. I awarded points for that. And now with the playoff system, starting with Bowl Coalition, then Bowl Alliance, then BCS, and now to the college football playoff, then you just award the championship based on who won those championship games and all that.
Okay, Matthew, when you had the idea originally for your project, did you have any idea it would be this much fun for you?
It's always fun trying to find out the truth, Ralph. Is there a way to determine greatness? Is there a system? It's like Bill James, doing with his historical baseball abstract. Is there a way to evaluate greatness using, a system? Is there a way to do it? In other words, eliminating prejudice, eliminating bias, eliminating, any type of thing that could, tip the scales. Basically, create a universal system that would be fair to all coaches from all eras, and then running those coaches through and coming up with a finished result where there it is. It's based on hard, verifiable numbers. I mean, for me, it was just trial and error, but, slowly figuring out what works and what didn't work, and the end result is my book here.
Wow. From start to finish, how long did it take you?
Well, I was tinkering at it for like many years, almost from I think it was like 2012, 2013, but like I said, there was a lot of trial error, and then finally by 2017, I nailed it. I finally perfected the system, and finally I had the right formula, which is contained in the pages of my book, and all I had to do now was write the thing, get the interviews taken care of, and to write the bios, and then just put it all in order, and then this whole year.
I guess that's what I meant by the fun part.
Yeah.
You've interviewed some terrific, interesting people.
Yeah. I mean, Ralph, I had 34 hours of interviews. I mean, I had Jim McMahon, the great quarterback of the Bears, who won Super Bowl 20,
Yes.
told me about Lavelle Edwards. I mean, great interview, funny guy. I mean, just a great interview. I talked to an old Notre Dame guy who played for Frank Leahy in the late 40s. He was a CIA guy. He was a spy, but he's in an old folks home in Maine, and he talked about old Frank Leahy because from 46 to 49, Notre Dame was unbeaten, and they won three national championships in a 4-year period, which is incredible. Only Nick Saban has matched that. I think Nick Saban matched that. Clendon Thomas, guys down in Oklahoma talking about Bud Wilkinson. I had Jeff Rutledge, who's now a high school football coach out in Arizona. He was the starting quarterback for Alabama when they won the national championships in 78, 79. Great guy, great interview. I talked to people all over the country, Ralph. Rain Fonts, who was in retirement in Florida, talked about being an assistant coach for John McKay. Urban Meyer, he was my last interview. Mere weeks after he had coached his last football game, 2019 Rose Bowl. He's got nothing to do, and I set it up. And great interview, not only about his own career, but he gave me insights about Nick Saban, Gary Patterson, Dabo Sweeney, Lou Holtz, Jim Tressel, and guys like that, because he knew those guys. Just beautiful little insights about how they won. What's the secret to those guys' greatness? And it was just incredible feelings, incredible information, which I tried to preserve and transmit in the pages of my book.
Now, as you talked about earlier on, the book was literally birthed this week when it came out. You have a picture on Facebook of opening the carton of your new books.
Yeah.
What's that like? What's that feeling like?
Like holding your first or second or third born child, just holding your baby in your arms. Because sadly, I have no biological children, so this is the closest it's ever come to holding a child, and it's a wonderful feeling because this book lives forever. It'll be, it's up on Amazon. It'll always be up on Amazon as long as I live, and now, it's available to the whole world, not just here in America, but it can be sold internationally if you so desire it. And again, it's a reference book. I mean, if someone's wondering, who's greater, Bear Bryant or Nick Saban, you can buy this book and you learn the answers. And,
you're too young to have this book be your only legacy. Have you a plan or something in the works to keep you going?
Yes, I'm presently working on my next book, which will be titled Lords of the Gridiron Part 2, Pro Football's Greatest Coaches. And I've already, throughout this past few months, I've been bagging interviews because not only, like when I was interviewing the guys for the college football book, those guys who played in the NFL, I also talked to them about their NFL careers when they played for coaches who would be featured in my book, like Clendon Thomas played for Buddy Parker, who coached the Detroit Lions and the Pittsburgh Steelers in the 50s and the 60s. Leroy Jordan talked about...
With tongue-in-cheek as a Jet fan, I ask you, did you talk to Lou Holtz about his Jet experience?
No, because it wasn't apropos to the book, so no, we didn't talk about that. And also, I was on a very limited window with Holtz. He could only spare me like about 45 minutes to an hour. So I had to focus solely on the college football experience and all that. But I talked to Jim McMahon about Mike Ditka. I just had in my last interview, I think was like with Harold Jackson, who talked about the late Chuck Knox at the Rams.
Oh, yes. Yes,
yeah.
Roman Gabriel's coach, as a matter of fact.
Yep. I talked to Marv Levy, who coached Buffalo to those 4 straight Super Bowls. Funny guy, incredible guy. He's in his 90s. He lives in Chicago. I talked to Dan Reeves, who talked about, coaching the Denver Broncos and Atlanta Falcons and playing for Tom Landry. Great interview, super guy. Lives in the greater Atlanta area. And I'm still working on that. In fact, I with my vacation, I wasn't able to send out any letters, but this weekend I'll be reaching out to more old football players, hoping I can add on, to my interviews and all of that. So I'm always reaching out to people, gaining insights about, the great pro coaches, George Halas, Vince Lombardi. I mean, I talked to Chuck Mersine, who was part of the Ice Bowl, '67, talked about that famous drive where he caught made those 2 big plays, that 19-yard pass catch and that 8-yard rush. And you talked about what made Lombardi so great, and Well,
speaking of Lombardi, I'm wondering if you ever talked about Jim Lee Howell's very, very famous coaching staff.
Oh yeah, Howell will be featured in the book, definitely. I mean, yeah. I mean, he was one great New York Giants coach. Incredible. I mean, way too short, but boy, what a team they were in the mid to late 50s. I mean,
that was my team with Chuck and Charlie from Ole Miss.
Yeah.
Quarterback. You had Gifford. You had Kyle Rote. You had Milt Triplett.
Yeah.
You had Jack Stroud on the line.
Yeah.
Ray White-Tekka.
Yeah.
I mean, these names
Rosie Brown.
are Rosie Brown. On the other side, you had Rosie Greer, Cat Cabbage, Modulewski.
And they were in the perfect place.
Unbelievable memories. And the guy, speaking of calling a guy up for interviews, when I'm 10 years old living in New York, I found out that Sam Huff, in season, lived in Flushing, New York, right next to Jackson Heights. So I get on the phone and I ask the operator, do you have a Sam Huff in Flushing? Yes, I do, she says, and I got his number. I'm 10. He's every week going up against Jimmy Brown and the like, And Mr. Huff, I said, do you mind if I talk to you for a second? I'm a big fan. It was one of my first calls, but it inspired me to call a bunch of people over the years and ask for interviews with the idea that they're just human beings. You can't be intimidated by them. And but I will say, Sam Huff, and as my friend Marty reminds me, there were some others. We won't get into them. Go on with your diatribe. You are the most interesting guy on your podcast.
Yeah, I mean, don't laugh. Jim Lee Howell will be featured in my next book. Definitely, most definitely. Also, Bill Parcells will be in it. Tom Coughlin. I'm still tinkering with the method. I think he'll be able to make it good. He had some bad seasons there, and he kind of borderline-ish, but I think he'll be able to make it. Tom Coughlin. I'm going to try.
Now, who does the editing? Do you combine with someone who can help you make those decisions, or you need no help? They're on you.
Well, for my first book, Bench Bosses, that was conventionally published through Penguin Random House Canada. I had an editor for that, but for my second and my third books, I had to do it all by my lonesome. I just don't have the money to hire someone, so I had to do it myself. But for this third book, Ralph, from the first week of February to literally the last week of August, every single day I was editing that book. I went through 6 drafts before you got what's available right now online. For literally 7 whole months, every single day I was going through 10 pages of the manuscript. Even when I was vacationing, I was editing, and boy, what an experience that was. If you read like my first draft and compare it with this book that you see now, enormous differences. I did a lot of cutting, but it was a lot of polishing, but it was good work. And I know my book it's my best effort yet, and I'm glad I did. It was a great learning experience doing it too.
Is it better if one is starting out to have their own editor, or to have the control that you were able to ascertain by doing your own editing?
What happens, it helps when you have a new set of eyes looking at the thing, because sometimes an editor can pick out things that you yourself forgot, and sometimes you're so immersed in it, it just swims in your eyes and you kind of lose objectivity. But the fact that I did it several times helped me out. I didn't see this before, now I see it now. But sometimes it helps. Both times it can help. If you got someone to help you edit, that's always good. I'm noticing a lot of books, like this guy would say, such and such really was good, and point out things that I had overlooked. So it's always helpful to have a fresh set of eyes. I just don't really have anyone I can really rely on for the time being. So I had to kind of do it all myself. But it's just both ways can be useful. Both can be useful.
Okay. Was there anything, when you got your book, you're holding your baby in your hands?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you thought of that you might have put in or left out of the book?
In other words, wish I could have put it in or something like that?
Right. Wish you could have put it in, or wish you could have taken it out?
Well, I wish I deliberately put a cap of 350 pages. My first draft was 390 pages, but I thought, no, I gotta chop it down, because I kept hoping I could get like a publishing deal, and I thought they would never take a 390-page book. Thing is, I could have gotten a publishing deal for this, but they wanted me to chop it down to 280 pages, and there was no way, Ralph, I could do that, because I would have had to leave the vast majority of those 34 hours of interview material on the cutting room floor, and it would have raped and gutted the whole manuscript, and it would have reduced it to a Dick and Jane reader, and I refuse to do that. This is not a Dick and Jane reader. This is a book where you get into the nuts and bolts of great college football, and you're sitting there in the locker room right beside those guys telling you the stories, and you're right there listening to Frank Kush giving a pep talk, or Barry Switzer, or Lou Holtz or Steve Spurrier giving you a pep talk and all of that. I mean, you're right there, you're getting direct evidence, direct testimony from these great players and these former college legends there. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't violate the integrity of the book. This is supposed to be a reference book. And I want people to know, like, wow, now I understand how Gil Dobie managed to win, those three perfect seasons at Cornell from 21 to 23, or why the Wonder Teams of California from 20 to 24 dominated the Pacific Coast Conference, or why Frank Leahy was such a great coach, in the late 40s and all of that. I want people to understand that this is a book of reference where, it answers questions. It's not superficial.
Okay, Matthew, how has coaching changed over the years?
Oh, in the 19th century, there was no such thing as professional coaching. It was just, you just did it for the love of the sport. It was supposed to be amateurish. But then by the early 20th century, it became a genuine profession, a way of life. And all of a sudden, it started developing, not just a coach who might have one assistant, but now you had a bunch of assistants, and you're starting getting this professionalism and also this CEO-type behavior. Now, the bureaucracy of college football is so massive, it's almost like a Byzantine court. I mean, you've got, video assistants, offensive line coaches, defensive backfield coaches, tight end coaches, quarterback coaches, running back coaches. I mean, it's delegation run right. I mean, Urban Meyer told me, he said, my assistants do the coaching, and I coach the coaches. I mean, that's what it is right now. It's literally the CEO orchestrating the strings, controlling it from heaven and all of that. Whereas in the old days, it was very much hands-on. I mean, I read accounts like Howard Harding Jones, who coached USC from the mid-20s up to before when he died in 1940. Even though he had assistant coaches, he always insisted on teaching his players how to block and tackle by himself. I mean, he would get right down in there, get in the stance, and and tell the players to go at him, and he would break it down. Foot placement. Where to hit with the body, how to use your shoulders, your head, the elbows and the arms and all of that. Personalized instruction, and now it's always the assistants, and the graduate assistants. I mean, there is a massive bureaucracy there, and it's almost like it's literally a corporation. I mean, if you look at
you went back to the 20s. I can go back to the late 50s. We talked about Jim Lee Howell. He had maybe 3 assistant coaches, maybe 2. I think Landry and 2 or 3. Am I correct?
Yeah,
now
Vince
there
Lombardi
must be
on offense, Tom Landry in defense, and I think he had a third guy whose name escapes. I think his name was Kavanaugh or something like that. Who coached
very well could have been.
Right, because there's a black and white photograph of the Giants coaching staff. There's 4 men: Howell, Landry, Lombardi, and that other guy. I think his name was Kavanaugh. I think there was a 4th guy there. So you had 1 head coach and 3 assistants. But boy,
now how many are there on the average NFL team?
Oh God, I can't count. I mean, I figure at least I'll bet you like between 10 to 12. Gotta be. When you think about it, by positions like defensive linemen, linebackers, secondary. I mean, that's 3 right there. You've got offensive line, quarterbacks, backfield, special teams. So it's got to be. I'll bet you like 10 to 12, varying from team to team. Gotta be.
Yeah.
Gotta be. Yeah.
Besides all the video guys and the assistant this and the assistant that.
Psychological guys, the shrinks, you got to have team psychologists because psychiatrists, because Nick Saban, he's had this since his days at Michigan State, past 20-some years, he's had this professional relationship with this professor of psychiatry at Michigan State who engages in sports counseling, how to tell players, forget about winning and losing, focusing on mastering your assignments on a given moment in time there. In other words, don't worry about the overall. Focus on the immediate task at hand. If you can master the task at hand, then that helps you win ultimately and all of that. Very much into sports psychology. And not just this one guy. He's got a team with him. So you've got psychiatric guys too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Besides the medical staff that in the old days they had 1 orthopedic surgeon And now they've got like 15 guys.
And nutritionists. You got nutritionists.
Right.
I mean, there's some coaches like have women who teach you yoga, flexibility, and yoga specialized exercises and all that. I mean, you got a lot of that. I mean, hyper specialization.
Now, with all of that in the last 40 years, would you say the game has improved or hasn't improved?
Wow. I think it has become. That's a relative term. And essentially, what I don't like about today's college football is the corporate sponsorship of it. In the old days, it used to be just the Rose Bowl. But now it's corporate sponsor bowl this, corporate sponsor bowl that. And in a sense, it takes away from, the purity of the sport. Now you're basically serving corporate America. But, I mean, the football is the football. I mean, you're seeing extraordinary efforts and all that. I mean, you're seeing Saban sustaining excellence that you really didn't see before in the old days, which, I mean, maybe a couple exceptions like Leahy in the late 40s and Bud Wilkinson from 53 to 57, or Bear Bryant from 61 to 66. But what Saban is doing is just it's off the scale. And you got Dabo Sweeney, doing the same thing at Clemson. Unfortunately, I was unable to interview Sweeney. I sent him a letter, but he sent me a very nice kindly letter of refusal. He gave me his autograph, so I can't be ticked off at him and all that. And he's a beautiful guy.
Anytime you can get an autograph, it's a good day. We are all Walter Mitty's one way or the other. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, Sweeney, very kind and sweet and gentle. Actually, he was working on his own book. That's why he couldn't interview with me, because it came out, and they have that no competition clause and all that, so that's why he couldn't do it. He couldn't say so, but as soon as I saw that other book, I thought, that's the reason why he turned me down. Can't help the competition and all that. So I'm not sad by that. I wish them all the luck in the world, and they're doing great work anyway. And it's just the game. I think it's becoming more organized now. I mean, with the playoff system, it's more structured. Whereas in the old day, you had to guess at who was going to be in the national championship. Which was the key bowl game? I mean, is it the Rose Bowl or is it going to be the Orange Bowl? What's going to be the key game to watch? And I kind of miss that old guessing game aspect of it. Which is the key game that's going to decide the national championship? I sort of miss those old days.
Okay, Matthew, we're coming to an end, but before we go, I just want to ask you, what about athletes being compensated for their efforts?
The fact that
you have an overall opinion on what's going on?
I think, yes. I think it's coming down to it. You've got billions upon billions of dollars circulating because of college football. You're getting coaches being paid astronomical salaries, actually more than the professors and all that, or the college presidents and all that. It's a mega billion-dollar business, and you've got these players who are sacrificing their bodies. I think the time has come. There's got to be some type of compensation. Just get rid of the pretense of it. Something has got to be done. And I mean, you've got these incredible TV contracts. I think the day's got to come. Either the players are going to do something about it, or the college, system's got to create it. It's not just football; it's college basketball as well. Something's got to be done. I mean, especially in basketball.
Okay, if I say the words student athlete to you, what comes up in your head?
It's a misnomer because it's basically almost like an unpaid slave in a sense, in my view, almost a bit of exploitation when you think about it. I think that's why the NBA did that one and done thing, because I think the college basketball people said, hey, it's not fair you drafting kids out of high school. We'd like to have, like Kevin Durant for 1 year, or a Derrick Rose or something like that. And you see with the college football, they can take them out in their junior years as well. It's always who's getting the almighty dollar here, and I think sooner or later the players, there's got to be some form of compensation. How, I don't know. I'm not good on the economics of it, but I think something's got to evolve.
Has the entire process become hypocritical to the nth?
Yeah. There's always that element of hypocrisy, especially not just in football, but like college basketball too. You can lump that in with it. I think a lot of those conference TV packages end in 2025. And, Ralph, it wouldn't surprise me if something radical happened 6 years from now, maybe some type of massive reorganization. Or I've always had this idea of wondering that maybe like the top 40 college football programs break off and create a league of their own, like a Premier League concept where the top 40 just play each other and they ignore the rest of the NCAA. In other words, there's no more SEC or Big 12 or Big 10. It's just the top 40 going at each other like a British Premier League, the best taking on the best. And then you have this elite, college football championship or something like that. I think I'd almost would say that because you know what I hate these days? You see Clemson or Alabama taking on these podunk universities like Citadel or Orville P. Snodgrass Teacher State College in some state in winning 85-0. I hate that. I'd like to see a system where the best taking on the best. In other words, no more fattening up your schedule by taking on those podunk colleges and winning 85-0, which is so boring. I mean, some real genuine competition. That's my feeling about it.
Matthew, I wish I could get more out of you. I wish you had an opinion on stuff. You're so shy.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. I never want to offer opinion that's unthought of. I don't want to speak reckless. I mean, I
know. I'm kidding. You're the most well-versed man on. We got going amongst the most well-versed men on our network, or women. And I'm proud to have you. I'm glad you decided to do a podcast of your own. Long time coming in my mind. Matthew, this was number one. More to come, ladies and gentlemen. It's the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Matthew DiBiase. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you for listening, everybody. Have a great night. Adios.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned Network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.